morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Wednesday, November 23rd, Thanksgiving Eve. Thanksgiving Eve. So, on a Thanksgiving Eve, looks like we're getting some economic data. It's coming out as I'm speaking to you. Let's give this page a little hard refresh here and see what the numbers look like. Durable goods, unemployment. Right, durable goods and unemployment. So, all right, things getting a little bit interesting here. Core durables and durables both missing the expectation. Of course, that's in the wrong direction. Remember that these things want to, if the Fed's looking for inflation to be getting better, then these prices want to come down. These are orders. Apologies, these are orders. Orders are up. Okay, so demand is up. All right, a little bit of a different story. Demand is up. But still, remember that higher demand means higher prices, and higher prices may reflect as higher inflation. So that one's a little bit more of a unemployment, though. Look at that, right? Big miss in the forecast. And, as we point out on the channel, sometimes to the Fed, bad news is actually good news. So this may have provided a little bit of a boost to the market. I haven't checked in on the ES since the numbers came out. Let's just take a look here. Let's go to I just want to get the preview to make sure I'm not talking sideways and saying the wrong things here. A little bit of volatility, not a whole lot of anything impressive. Kind of just still stuck sideways in this upper range, which, consider what day it is. As we just pointed out, it's Thanksgiving Eve. All right, Thanksgiving Eve. So I wouldn't think about that too hard here. I think the biggest deal will, of course, be at 2 o'clock when we get our FOMC meeting minutes right down here towards the bottom of your screen. 2 o'clock, meeting minutes on a light volume trading day. I don't know. Seems like a little bit of a recipe for games to be played, possibly. So we'll see. But this is really going to wrap it up for the week, right? Obviously, Thursday is our Thanksgiving holiday. The market will be closed. And on Friday, we've got a 1 p.m. half day, right? So the market will close at 1 p.m., and that will be that. I imagine that many traders just take the day off. We might pop in and do a pre-market live just to see how the charts are kind of opening up, but I am not expecting to be actively trading on Friday, right? Not at all, okay? So that's what we've got for the remainder of the week. Of course, the week following is where things heat up again and we get more important data around jobs. You get Fed Chair speaking as well, 1:30 next Wednesday. Unemployment, core PCE. I mean, just a big week. Average hourly earnings, non-farm, unemployment rate. All right, so it'll be a pretty stacked week next week from an economic data perspective. But for now, pretty quiet into the remainder of the week with the possibility of some games being played at 2 o'clock. We'll see. We will, of course, wait and see. What do we see for stock-specific headlines? Stock futures are slightly higher as investors look ahead to the Fed meeting minutes. Hyundai's best year in the U.S. will be tested by the Inflation Reduction Act. Mortgage demand rises 2.2% as interest rates decline slightly. Okay, interesting. Morgan Stanley says Twitter sentiment needs to turn to stop Tesla's $500 billion slide. Missing a couple of zeros there. $500. A $500 slide. No big deal. It's just $500, right? Yes and no. I think the most interesting thing about this quote-unquote experiment is to see how how Tesla runs with Elon Musk's brain. This is a rough drawing of a brain being split, right? Left and right brain. You got your squigglies there, brain matter, whatever, you get the gist. How will Tesla run with Elon Musk's brain? Tesla, you've got SpaceX. Let's put an X here. You've got Neuralink. You've got Boring Company. And then over here, you've got Twitter, right? So this does seem to be the balance, at least as of right now. It's these things are on one half, and Twitter is entirely its own half, right? So Twitter is almost just as important to Elon as those four over here. So just something to continue to watch. Again, how Tesla manages itself with a split brain of the CEO, or what do you call himself? Chief coin operator? I forget what he changed his title to, but That'll be the interesting thing there. Anyways, I think that Morgan Stanley is a little bit skeptical, right? A little bit skeptical there, and rightfully so. More stuff about FTX. Unfortunate, but it seems like these violent act outs have been increasing. Or maybe they've always been happening, but the news does seem to be reporting more and more of them. It feels like over the past couple weeks almost. So that's interesting. And always unfortunate if anyone is wrapped up in a situation like that, we always are sending our best. Despite a challenging holiday period, KeyBank sees new retail stock winners, so retail getting a little bit of an upgrade there. Europe gas prices leave some nations dismayed, saying it's far too high. What else? Biggest movers pre-market look like earnings candidates, Supreme Court, this, that, the other thing. HP. All right, so HP just announced earnings, right? But they also announced that they're laying off 4,000 to 6,000 employees globally over the next 3 years. So again, I'll bring up this chart momentarily, but unemployment is going to start looking like this. Unemployment usually takes the stairs down and the elevator up. When something bad happens, it's like every mass layoffs cause something like this, and that's where we have to worry about, of course, recessions and the impact on the market as people are not, spending discretionary. So interesting look there from HP, continuing along the sort of trend of tech layoffs recently. Greenlight a $4.2 billion capital raise for Credit Suisse. What else? Stock-specific stuff. That's it. Nothing crazy. I'd say that the HP layoff news is probably one of the bigger things. A little bit of a bolster for retail. And then up towards the top, we saw a couple of headlines about Twitter and Tesla, right? Just the split mind of Elon Musk. So nothing crazy out there from a stock-specific headline perspective. Earnings candidates, of course, we know that it was John Deere before the open, HP, Guess, and Nordstrom after the close yesterday. And apparently I saw some news. I didn't see some news, but I saw in the chat that John Deere did decent. Is that what I was seeing from the chat? Did someone say that they got a gap up here? Thought I caught it out of the corner of my eye. But that's what we've got. Nothing, of course, after the close, and quiet the remainder of the week. Nothing to see here, so we'll move along. Here are the ES futures on the wrong time frame. Let's go up to the 4-hour. And we'll, of course, do our full rundown, starting from the 4-hour and continuing on from here. But first, let's see who's with us in the chat this morning. Scrolling all the way on up to the top, we've got INF, man. Again, you're on a hot streak, dude. You are on a hot streak. After that, we've got Nick Farrell, Raul, Nancy, Davey, Plant-Based Will, the original Rude Boy. We've got Roger Tutt, Mickey Swipe, Day Slayer, Raz, Live Better, I see you. We've got Chloe, John Cardozo, Leon, Clint, Clyde, Jake, Infornity. We've got Rolando, Young Trades, Steve V. We've got 3D World 2. Carlos is here. Skippy, Dominic, Cliff, Rurk, James P, DP, Diecast, Almost AV Day Trader, Daniel, Jeep for Life, Kazir, Abel, Ryan Speed, Crypto Vader, Chris Parker, Kevin Winston, Soldier Down, Carl Ware, Brian LeBlanc, Elmer Wood, Chad $7, Stargazer, Ross Muir. We've got Keaton Rogers. Who else? Gonna start looking for some green names here. Andy North, Byron. We've got Stevie J. Sharath is in the building. Crypto Commando is here. Doug K. Mona Makes Mora. We got Empower, Ty, G Money, Alex Dickinson, Jay with the Gold Cash Bag, Jay Roldan Tax Service LLC. Got to make sure I get my names correct here. I know we also have a J Roland, right? Not Roldan. Anyways, Raz is here. Who else? Pete and Repeat. Absolute classic. Got to call him out. Green name or not. Got to call him out every time. Johnny, Leonardo, Ape Man. I see some of you guys. Sweet Al, right? Joel Clark. Good morning. All right, that's going to wrap it up for shoutouts this morning. If you didn't get one and you want one, the earlier you get here and the sooner you say something in the chat, the more likely I will get you. With that being said, 4-hour time frame chart in the ES. What do we see here in front of us? Certainly remaining in the uptrend. And to me, as we're coming in for this equal high, it certainly looks like we're putting this in, last Thursday's low, as a higher low. That could be our 4-hour higher low. We've, of course, got to make it here to the equal high first to confirm this, but it's looking like that's the case as of right now with all of these prior lows, right? We've got lows, higher lows, higher lows, higher lows. From here to here, if we get a next higher high, confirmed, 4-hour remains bullish. So 4-hour chart is definitely back in the game, and it's on the bull side. Yesterday, we were a little bit skeptical, right? A little bit skeptical, opening right around this level, that 4-day balance low we had discussed. But obviously, with yesterday's move to the upside, we've firmly recaptured it, and in the pre-market, we're consolidating up towards these highs. So to me, the 4-hour remains in an uptrend. It'd be hard to argue that the 4-hour is in a downtrend, right? Just can't do it. Can't do it. So in terms of important overhead levels that we should at least be mindful of course, your high here is in play. That's around 40.50. 40.50 in the ES, all right? And that, of course, represents a gap from back here. That's the yellow bar. The yellow bar opens again at 40.50. That's the beginning of the gap, and the high from in here. And the top, the gap close, is up around 41.03. 41.03. Now, I'm not making the argument that we do something like this on today's session. Could it happen? Yeah, it always could be a possibility. But, of course, what I want to point out for the most part is as we're heading closer to Thanksgiving, just look at the volume trend. Volume is declining, right? Volume is coming in a little bit. Obviously, you're always, let me be very clear about this, you're always going to have higher volume in periods of volatility. We know that this is when the VIX was fairly elevated, right? So you're always going to have higher volume then, but as we come out of this and as we head into a holiday, we're getting some lower volume trend looks down here. So all that would say is that, again, I don't feel as though a full gap closes on the table just because we don't have the type of quote-unquote gas in the tank to drive the market there in the first place. If you see a low volume float that just kind of does something like this and the volume is really paltry, maybe we print volume bars like that on today's session, then that would be a little bit of a red flag. I mean, we're certainly going to count it as a valid equal and higher high, and it's going to be a gap close. I mean, there's nothing saying that it's not valid, but on low volume like that, you might want to just be a little bit more cautious and expect some sort of pullback as participants, come back to the market possibly on Monday. So just something to be mindful of, but not really going to, one way or another impact the day trading too much on today's session. Here's the hourly time frame chart, and you can certainly make the argument that this is now neutral. Remember on yesterday's session, we were looking at a downtrend, right? We were thinking highs, lower highs, lower highs, lower highs, and we had lows, lower lows, lower lows. We were waiting for that equal low. It never came, right? We resolved the 4-day balance lows, and now you would make the argument that the trend is neutral, right? This is kind of neutral in here. You could say you've got high, you've got low, you've got lower highs, but you've got higher lows, and now you've got higher highs. So the trend's at best neutral, right? This is not a downtrend anymore. And what we discussed yesterday as well was a trend line that looked like this, and obviously we broke that to the upside. So the trend on the hourly chart is certainly now working its way back to an uptrend, but I would classify it as neutral. All right, so you've got a 4-hour bullish trend. You've got an hourly neutral trend. What does the 15-minute suggest? Let's take a look. Here's the 15-minute time frame, getting a little bit more of a bearish reaction now to some of those numbers that came out at 8:30. So we'll adjust our overnight low down slightly. And what would we see here? Like, what does this suggest? Well, let's walk through the 3 questions. Question number 1, where are we opening in relationship to the prior day's range? Here's the high, here's the low. We're definitely opening closer to the prior high of day than the prior low of day, right? So that's a bullish piece of information, but it's not a gap. So I'll put an X and a G here for no gap. All right, so inside of range, but definitely towards the upper third. Whenever we're opening in range, we always ask question 1.5, which is where are we in relationship to the value area? Here's value area high. Value area low is closely aligned with the prior low of day. We're not opening in the value area. We're opening above the value area, which does strike me as a slightly more bullish than bearish piece of information, right? This is a push out of this consolidation. This is where the market was content, right? So as long as we're above that, the bulls are making steps in the right direction. It is bullish. So that's question 1 and 1.5. Question 2, where are we opening in relationship to the overnight range? There's your high, here's your low. We're certainly opening dead on the overnight lows as we're getting this slight push to the downside. So I'll put a down arrow here. But, the overnight range is really compressed. It's certainly not nearly as significant as the prior day's range, and it did not make significant strides into the value area at any point in time. Sure, we had a little bit of action above the prior high of day here, but it's not like it had a significant push up towards that 40-50 that we have to be concerned with. So overall, I think that it's still a neutral read on the open. Still a neutral read on the open with a slight bullish edge being above the value area high. Now, question number 3 is going to tell us a little bit as well. What's the overnight inventory position? And to do that, you would just extrapolate the settlement print, which is right around in here. So settlement is the same thing as saying the closing print. How much time was spent above? How much time was spent below? Notice that we've got almost 50-50 split. Some time here, and we're coming a little bit more firmly underneath now. But overall, it's not like the overnight inventory is, hugely imbalanced in one direction or another. So 50-50 net long and short in the overnight doesn't really give us a whole lot to go off of for inventory correction on the open. So I think it's a patience play on the opening bell here. Remembering that it's the Thanksgiving Eve session, remembering that volume we just visibly saw the taper in volume over the past couple of days. I wouldn't be surprised if the market doesn't do a whole lot of anything impressive on today's session. Again, let me be very clear that when I say things like this, it doesn't mean you don't trade the market on a day like today. If a setup's there, you can take it, and trading the market is okay on a day like today. However, at the end of, when it's all said and done, on a day like today, it all boils back down to one word. What's that word? I'm gonna ask that as a legitimate question to the chat, and I'm gonna let that simmer for about 1 minute here. What is the word? It starts with an E, and it's something that you have to manage on a day like today. It starts with an E, and you have to manage it on a day like today. You can trade, but you got to keep this in check. And here's a hint, right? Realistic perspective. Yes, Thomas Invest. Yes, fantastic. I love to see it. Live Better, nailed it. B Stark, nailed it. Mr. Oso, nailed it. Pete and Repeat, nailed it. Big Stick, all you guys nailing it. Expectations, I don't even have to let it simmer for that long. You guys are nailing it. Good. This is exactly what I wanted to see. This makes me. You guys have no idea. How happy it makes me. Seeing all of these responses here that are just absolutely nailing it. Yeah, emotions as well. That ties into expectations. I would say that that's a valid answer too, but I was thinking expectations. If you can manage your expectations on a day like today and be okay with the market not really doing anything all that impressive, let's just pretend here. I'm not saying that this will happen on the open, but let's say we get a bull flag right over the prior high of day, and then we break the overnight high, but we only move 10 points, 5 points, don't be looking for a target that's 20 points away on a low volume day like this. You can see our price axis here is a 5-point increment. If we get a 10-point breakout, a 5-point breakout, maybe that's all it is for the day. Don't be swinging for the fences and saying, oh, the gap's going to close on today's session. Right? Manage those expectations. Don't be disappointed if the breakout is not as big as you thought. If the breakdown, it could go either way, right? Is not as big as you thought. Just manage those expectations. Recognize what type of day it is. It's the day before a big holiday in the U.S. Markets will be closed. Just manage those expectations, manage those emotions, and I think you'll be served well. Okay? All right. Awesome. Beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to see. All those responses in the chat. Here are a couple situations that I would be thinking about for today's open. Because of the 3 questions that we just answered, right, we're fairly neutral. We're expecting balance. If the balance happens above the value area, anywhere above value area high, which is 39.97, I would be leaning on bullish outcomes for some upside here. I would target the overnight high and watch for some type of trend to develop somewhere in here. And the reason being is really coming from the daily time frame chart. If we just go back to the hourly, I'm going to show you from the hourly perspective, but think in terms of the daily, right? We knew that it was really right here. This was a 4-day balance. 1, 2, 3, 4. This constitutes a look below and now fail, right? We've accepted back inside of the balance. So to me, the sellers had their opportunity really a couple of times. Sellers had their opportunity on the gap down, never made anything happen. They had their opportunity here when we looked back into the range, faded out, but the buyers closed back in. That was solid. Monday, right? We get that real tight consolidation day. Sellers failed underneath the Friday low. We talked about that in yesterday's stream, right? So the failure there, that was bullish. And now obviously we saw the follow through. So I would be looking for bull outcomes, noting that we got our 4-hour higher low. It's possibly this area right here. We're back inside of the balance range. And the the sellers have proved to us multiple times here as well specifically, that the sellers don't really have it going on. Sellers don't really have it going on. So I would be leaning on bull outcomes as long as we get opening range consolidation above the value area high, right? So again, just to reiterate what I would be watching for as a primary objective of the market, always think in terms of objectives of the market. Any consolidation here strikes me as really bullish, looking for breaks over the top, overnight high target, then continuation to see if we can get to that 40-50. Again, manage those expectations. 40-50 is the structural target. I don't know that we get all the way there on a light trading volume session. All right. And all of this is to say as well that at 2 o'clock, of course, do expect a little bit of volatility, 2 p.m. So anyways, on the open, expecting chop, expecting balance. If we get a range, looking for a poke out of the top, possibly the first higher low pullback that supports somewhere above the top of the opening range is a solid buy setup as well. Something that possibly pulls back and respects VWAP as we're coming out of that opening range. That's kind of what I would watch for here as objective number 1 of the market. Objective number 2 of the market is it's a holiday, or it's about to be a holiday. It's a light volume session. So objective number 2 is just this. Inside bar, digest what happened yesterday. We'll see what takes place on Friday. All right, so objective number 2 is a choppy day, not doing anything all that impressive, balancing in the value area. Who knows? Maybe it's this first and then it's something like this. But the idea about objective number 2 for the market is that we don't do anything impressive. There's nothing impressive that takes place. The third objective of the market, this is lowest on the list of things that I would be watching for. Again, this to me would not seem like a likely outcome. Would be a bear trend that cleanly moves to the prior low of day, dead cat bounce, and then breaks that prior low of day. This is very, very low on the list of probable outcomes that I would believe in, right? And the reason being is for all of the reasons we just discussed on the hourly time frame chart, where the sellers have clearly shown us their hand and said, yeah, the sellers aren't really that strong. Buyers keep picking up price, right? Buyers keep picking up price. So that's how I would rank order what you should be watching for on today's session. But based on the 3 morning questions, the early morning indications to me would indicate some sort of balance and then watching for a move one way or another. If the market moves higher, you know that we're getting that possible breakout situation, but manage your expectations. And if we break lower, I would probably favor some chop through the value area, just going sideways on a light volume day. Okay, that's what I've got for you in the ES. In terms of my situations, what does the chat seem to think is going to unfold on today's session? So if you think it's going to be opening range to break out, do something like this. Let's see a number 1 in the chat. If you're a little bit more neutral, maybe something that does this. You get the lower low but the higher high, and you chop around and you close somewhere in the prior day's range and value area. Let's see a number 2 in the chat. And of course, the bears who want the bear trend to go right to the prior low of day, dead cat bounce, and then a breakdown for the close beneath. Let's see a number 3 in the chat. If you've got no idea what's going to unfold on today's session, a number 4 will suffice. And I wouldn't blame you for a number 4 on a day like today, right? I wouldn't blame you. As you guys know, my thought process is for a number 1, right? Opening range, some sort of bullish look over the prior high of day, and see if we can get some slight continuation in the upward direction. Now, these situations, of course, only hold true up until 2 p.m. At 2 p.m., we'll be getting those FOMC meeting minutes, which the market should know everything that's in the meeting minutes. There shouldn't be any major surprises, but if there are, that's where you're going to get some volatility. It's simply not something that we can forecast, surprise or not. But just be prepared for the possibility of volatility at 2 p.m. I would, to be quite honest with you guys, I think that on Thanksgiving Eve, the move is to trade the morning session up until, maybe 11:30. That's usually when the morning session starts to slow down a little bit for the lunch hour. I would trade the morning session up until 11:30. I would come back at 1:30, see if anything's setting up, see if there's a trade to take. If nothing really obvious is set up, I would not want to trade into that 2 p.m., right? And I would just sort of call it at that, start your travel plans, maybe hang out early with some friends and family for Thanksgiving. If your folks are coming into town and, they're here showing up on a Wednesday night so they can spend all day tomorrow, then, it's a beautiful thing. Go spend some time with them. Get away from these darn screens, right? I just realized I never typed up the official YouTube poll, so I'm going to do that now. So what do you think? Question marks. I also got some feedback yesterday that we spend a little bit too much time here on the ES and the broad market. Oops, why is that not working? One bullish. And, I can understand where that's coming from. Let me type this. You guys know I can't type and talk at the same time. You guys know I can't type and talk at the same time, so I'm just going to type this and then I'll go back to what I was about to say. No clue. All right. Official YouTube poll is out there in the community. All right. What I was saying is I got some feedback that we spend a little bit longer than some folks may prefer on the ES, and there's a preference to get into the core list of companies here a little bit sooner. Is that something that people agree with, kind of disagree with? My personal view, as I wait for some responses to come in, my personal view is that going over the ES, right, spending this much time on the ES is extremely important because the ES, think about the ES as the driver of, or the current. The ES is like the current of the overall market, right? It's really, really hard to fight the current. Really, really hard to fight the current. So what the ES does, it's very likely that our core list of companies are going to follow suit to some degree as well, right? You probably should be trading in the direction of the broad market in these core list of companies. So I personally think, and I'm a firm believer, and you guys probably noticed this in the trading that I've shared with you, is, the ES is in the driver's seat. I'm not going to be looking for a big counter trend move in some individual name here if the ES is completely falling apart. There's no real reason to be going long some move. If the ES is falling apart, you want the tailwind, so to speak. You want the current of the overall market to be flowing in your direction. So I personally am a big believer that the ES kind of is worth spending the most time on. But of course, the whole point of doing the stream is to sort of do what I want, but also at least acknowledge what the chat wants to see as well, and make sure that we have a balance of those two things. So anyways, I see some comments coming in about that, and what I'm going to do is scroll up to the top. I'm going to see what we've got for responses to the poll, and then I'll acknowledge yes, no, maybe so on the time spent for the ES. John Cardozo, good morning. Alex Dickinson, good morning. We've got Elmer Wood kicking us off with a number 1. Muda Man with a 2. Lots of 2s and 3s coming in early on. We've got a couple of 1s. I would say the overwhelming look, as I'm just scrolling briefly through the chat, is for a number 2 neutral type of day, which makes sense based on what we know. Chris Parker with the straight up number 3, a couple 4s as I'm getting deeper down the list, but lots of 2s, and the official YouTube poll is also favoring a number 2. Hey, would you look at that? Thinkorswim with a nice little reminder there. Thursday, November 24th is a market holiday. Thank you. But lots of 2s, and I would say it probably goes 2s, then 1s, then 3s. That's kind of the outcome of the poll here, just from a typed in perspective. Daniel says, just came here. Are we going down or up at the open? Wrong question. Wrong question. What else? What else? All right. We're getting into some responses to ES, yay or nay, and it seems like people are liking the ES review. What else? Yes, Real, the green line is the 200 SMA, the blue line is the 50 SMA. You can never spend too much time on the broad market. Time on the ES is good. Focus more on the ES. SPY. Personally, only here for the SPY ES analysis. Love the ES. Appreciate. All right, so it does seem that the people here in the chat are definitely fans of the ES. Definitely fans of the ES. All right, so we're not gonna change We're not going to change something if it's overwhelmingly positive here. So, if you try to make everybody happy, you'll probably make nobody happy. And I think that what we're doing has been working personally. I just wanted to gauge the sentiment of the chat as well. So, all right, ES stays as is. ES stays as is, right? We've got a Democratic vote on, what took place. We've got a vote across the entirety of the chat. And it seems the people have spoken, right? Democracy here. All right. And by the way, let me be very clear. I say, just because we had a voting system, I said democracy. That's not a comment one way or another on political views. All right. Anyways, we've got our ES, we've got our situations, we've got our pre-market outcomes that we're favoring, and that's that. All right, let's go. Austin, too much time speaking on stuff like this instead of focusing on the markets. Yeah, Austin, when you run a community, when you kind of have a group of people that you've been interacting with, then you gotta engage the people. Okay. You got to engage the people. We're here for some form of entertainment. If we can make your morning a little bit brighter by, having a little bit of entertainment sprinkled in, a little bit of conversation, getting the people involved in the decisions made here on the channel, I think that's a positive thing. And if it takes away from the stream, then, it's the 5 minutes you got to sit through before we move on to the next thing. Speaking of the next thing, let's dive right in to our NQ. What's going on with the NQ? 4-hour time frame chart. 4-hour time frame chart. What do we see on the NQ 4-hour? Here we go. There's the original balance range. Looked into it, and now we're back above. So to me, very, very important that Thursday low held. We never really broke down underneath the Thursday low. That, to me, was a very bullish sign. I was actually looking for possible shorts yesterday morning as we were interacting with this level. We went right to it. I was waiting for the dead cat bounce and break. It just never happened. It just never happened. All right? And instead, we certainly have on the 4-hour, and we'll see that on the hourly as well, a break of the trend line. And we've moved back higher. We're above the top of the original balance, which was that 11.7 level that we've been discussing. So 4-hour seems as though, the 4-hour certainly seems as though we've certainly found a bit of a higher low. So the next step is confirming that with an equal high up here around 12,100. And then we'll reassess what the trend situation looks like. But to get there, obviously, that would imply some upward activity. Let's take a look at the hourly chart. What's going on the hourly perspective? Certainly, again, breaking the downtrend. If you drew in something that looked like this, you can see we struggled right at it here, broke it into the end of day on yesterday's session. The consolidation in the pre-market is towards the upper third of the prior day. From a trend count perspective, we had highs, lower highs. This is now a equal high roughly to this area in here. And we've got equal lows. Right, so the trend is starting to neutralize in this segment right here. It's not all the way there yet. I would say that the hourly chart still has a little bit of work to do. It's really got to get a little bit more of a higher high before we could say, all right, the trend's neutral now. But it's looking better. It's looking better. All right, the main takeaway is the recapture of 11.7 and the break of the resistance trend line that looked something like this. All right, so that's the hourly 15-minute time frame chart. What do we see here? I've got to go kill the heat. It's right behind me. Still hear me talking, I'm sure. But my goodness, drying out here. It's the one downfall of electric heat. It makes the air very dry. NQ. 15-minute time frame chart. 3 questions. Where are we opening in relationship to the prior day's range? We're opening right at the prior high of day, flirting with a gap up. It's technically a gap up, but it's not one that we would fade, certainly, by any stretch of the imagination. So we'll put an up arrow here. But not going to fade the gap. So I'll put an XG just like we did in the ES. Question number 2, where are we opening in relationship to the overnight range? There's your high, there's your low. Certainly did not press into the overnight lows as we were getting that, reaction from the news here this morning. So right in the midpoint, to be quite frank with you, which is neutral, right? Neutral. You don't really have tight risk reward based on some interaction of the overnight range bounds. Question number 3, last but certainly not least, where are we from a inventory perspective? Extrapolate the settlement print, same thing as saying the close. How much above, how much below? Definitely a little bit more net long in the NQ. I would say something to the tune of like 60% net long. All right, so overall, I think it's still got to be a patience play here. There's no obvious setup based on the three questions. We're opening too close now inside of, but too close to the prior high of day for any sort of meaningful gap or break to sort of unfold. We're in the midpoint of the overnight range, so again, you don't really have a directional edge based on cracking one of those levels, the range bounds there. And inventory is fairly balanced, right? It's not net long or net short, maybe a slight edge to the buyers, but nothing too impressive. So I think the NQ is a patience play on the open as well. That should really go without saying. Some things that I would be mindful of. Notice how we are, the value area in the NQ did shift higher. The ES looked something like this, and we were opening above the value area in the ES. So this is ES VAH. Notice that your NQ is obvious. Well, maybe I shouldn't say obvious. It might be difficult to see on your screen, but it's overlapping with the prior high of day. So the market in the NQ is actually very content just seeing two-sided trade back and forth take place in this box. So you might be looking for more of a balanced day in the NQ than in the ES, right? Just noting where we're at from a value perspective. If the NQ is going to be bullish, what you would want to see is that opening range pop above the prior high of day, put in more price acceptance above, and then crack that overnight high, which unlocks your up move. And the up move, let's call it what it is, a breakout, right? Should take us, let's go hourly chart so we can find the proper target here. After hours off, of course. Your target would be somewhere in here. 11,840. 11,840. All right, so about a 50-point breakout over the overnight high could be in store in the NQ. That's a very reasonable range to trade for. And again, on a day where we should be managing expectations, that would be the first look. After that, we know it's our range from up here around 12,000. 12,000. Okay, so those are your upper targets if we get some price acceptance over the overnight high. And if we just fall back down into range, you guys know the drill. In here, just expect chop, balance. I would not be overly directional. I would take scalps back and forth, but nothing crazy in there. Wouldn't read into it as a huge day to get active on Thanksgiving Eve. That's the NQ. Let's take a look at the /RTY and see what's going on with the rut. 4-hour time frame chart first, of course. Notice that the Russell is also trying to find that 4-hour higher low. The hourly chart looks better, right, with low, higher, low, higher, low. We sort of have more of a micro trend phenomenon on the hourly, which we'll see momentarily. But on the 4-hour, it's still, it's still very bullish, right? You can make the argument that the 4-hour higher low set overall, this in general, is above the trend line, is above the CPI gap, which is bullish, right? So now we're looking for a crack of this level right here, very, very clear area. Overnight high is stacked there. It was the double top neckline. It was the rejection here, here, and here, right? If we can recapture that, we're sort of looking for that rotation back to the double top highs closer to 1915. 1915. All right. So hourly chart, so we can look briefly at that trend. Notice again, this is an ascending triangle. You could draw in something that looks like this. That is a bullish pattern, bullish wedge, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't really matter, but it's basically the hallmark signs, higher lows, equal highs. When and if you knock on that door, the bulls are making progress in the upper direction. Knock on that door again, ask for the higher high, and eventually it will be granted. And that's where we'll look for that 1915. So the breakout level is 1870. We've been discussing 1870 as the number right here, here, here. So I would use 1870 overnight high as a possible area of inflection to the upside. Let's go to the 15-minute chart though, because of course we've got to make some adjustments. You can clearly see that we're falling back down into range a little bit more aggressively in small caps. All right, a little bit more aggressive here. One thing I would say is that we supported right at this area. Value area high is stacked with the prior high of day, so it would have been a great look to see value area high here. It just simply wasn't the case with the market on close volume that went through. It pushed it higher. But, the overnight low respecting that certainly does strike me as a reasonable look. Here to here. Okay, so Russell has to hold overnight low. If the Russell holds the overnight low, that keeps your market kind of in balance. And if it breaks over the overnight high, that's where we get a little bit more aggressive on the upside. Remember, that's at 1870 level we just saw on the hourlies. And underneath the overnight low, remember, Russell's been acting as a leader. If this starts chopping around in the prior day's range, the bulk of the prior day's range here, I would say trade's kind of off for today's session. I wouldn't look for anything too impressive out of the NQ or the ES. One thing that I would say about the Russell, though, is of course you want to see if we can continue to respect the higher low phenomenon that's been taking place. So I would keep an eye on a trend line that looks something like this. So you probably don't want to see the rut much lower than value area low on today's session. Maybe there's a little bit of wiggle room there, but you don't really want much price acceptance under value area low on today's session for the Russell. Otherwise, this pattern here starts to become less attractive for a breakout, right? You start making equal lows, lower lows. All right, no longer is this a bullish look, and instead it's continuing to give us, not the best feeling with the price acceptance underneath that original range from up here where the double top was, okay? So Russell, very important to keep an eye on and how it resolves this kind of 1870 in the coming days, either today to the upside or downside, or Friday to the upside or the downside, right? Definitely worth keeping an eye on 1870 for overall broad market direction. All right, 9:12 on the clock. Let's take a look through very briefly the core list. We'll do the ETFs, then we'll dive into the core list. We've got, plenty of time for the core list. We'll save the sectors and some commentary for later. SPY, look below and fail, is playing out on the daily time frame chart, right? We got our trend day yesterday, filling the gap and reversing off of it as we discussed in the pre-market live. As of right now, we're opening towards those highs. Let's see if we can get this little bit of continuation into that 403 bottom of the gap, right? That's the equivalent of 40.50 on our ES charts that we just discussed, right? This is 40.50, it's 403 on your SPY cash index. All right, if we break down, you of course want to see your value area high hold, which is roughly the equivalent of 398.50. 398.50. So a breach of the overnight low here causes a pullback that respects something like this. That would look decent in your SPY. All right, so 398.50 is your primary support. As long as we're above it, you could possibly look for that continuation move to the 403. If we break down underneath 398.50, this is where you get your chop. Probably chalk it up to a no trade through that area. All right, that's your SPY. Let's take a look at the QQQ, NASDAQ 100. Again, the recapture is very important of that 283.50. We discussed that. That's the equivalent of the 11.7 level. On the NQ, back above, no move underneath Thursday's low. That strikes me as very, very important. In the QQQ futures, remember that we're opening basically at the prior high of day. We're doing that here in the Q cash index as well. So as long as we're above 286, things are looking much more bullish than bearish for that continuation up towards the top of the range here. 290.50 is your target. But again, be mindful, manage expectations. The NQ target that we discussed was just your Friday's high, which is going to be around 287, let's round up there, 287.75. 287.75 would be your upside target here, remaining outside of and above the prior range in the QQQ. Pulling back into it, again, your value area high is stacked at the top because of those market on close orders, but structurally, I would also watch the same sort of flag area as what we just discussed in the ES. What would the number be? Let me hover my cursor here so we can grab it. 284.66. 284.66, right in this area, 284.66. A pullback into that is what you kind of want to see hold if you want to see continued higher lows in the upper direction. All right? I suppose, let's just be realistic about this as well. It wouldn't be the end of the world pulling all the way down into 283.50. It just would not be as ideal. Right? It wouldn't be as ideal, but a daily chart that looks something like this, higher low with proof, respecting that 283.50, that also would be okay. Breaking down underneath 283.50, of course, changes the tone, and that would, of course, be concerning. That puts back into play what is now a flush point, multiple lows all stacked at that Thursday low area. The number, just to give it to you, is 280.80. All right, I don't think it's in play. Obviously, we're opening towards the top, slight gap up as of right now, but 280.80 I would carry forward as important if we fail at 283.50. This will all be coming out tonight as well in the midweek market update, even though we've got a closed market tomorrow. We'll see. IWM, Russell 2000 and small caps. What's going on in the cash index? Again, it's got to recapture that upper level. We just saw this on the RTY futures. It's 184.80. You can see prior resistance, support, breakdown, resistance. We've got to recapture that as long as we're putting in the possibility of a higher low somewhere above 184.20, overnight low, prior high from yesterday. We just talked about that in the Russell. As long as we're putting in consolidation here, the possibility for a breakout remains. And of course, we want to see that trend line hold, just a rough, something that looks like this. You don't really want to move too much further. Yeah, it's a little bit deeper, I guess. you really don't want to go underneath 183.50. I'd call 183.50 right around in here in your IWM. Otherwise, you risk the trendline break on the ascending triangle, right? If we just grab a couple more days here, I'll just show it to you on the rut. There we go. Oops, let's go with this. Wow, terrible drawing. Meant to grab the straight edge. There we are. I guess that actually a little bit lower. Is it lower? Could be lower. Could be lower in the IWM. 183.50 is here. So there's some room. There's a little bit of room, but you overall just don't want to see a move underneath that trend line. So I'd watch the trend line in the Russell. All right, that's what I'm getting at. Trend line 184.80. Those are the two levels in the IWM. Remember, it's more of a market gauge than anything else. Core list of companies. Here we go. Core list of companies. Apple. Apple's always up first on the chopping block. Very, very good look in Apple with the look underneath the overnight, right? And a failure from the sellers, moved back higher. So bulls definitely trying to make a stand here. Unfortunately, this daily chart here is difficult to play into. I think, you've got to be patient for a break over the 2-day highs at this point, which is above 150. We're opening inside the midpoint of a 2-day balance, essentially. Here, you could just chalk that up to 2 days back and forth balance. Obviously more bullish than bearish with the failure from the sellers underneath the original bar's low. But to get out of, to get back in gear, it's got to take out those highs. It's got to develop a new trend over that top. There's some grammar for us on a Wednesday morning. 150.35. All right, over 150.35 gets interesting in Apple for continuation. I would target the top of the overall daily balance up here, which would be around 153.15. About a 3.5, just shy of a 3-point move. Definitely worth watching for there. All right, so that's Apple upside. For downside, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced in Apple based on the failure from the sellers in yesterday's session. If we just chop around in the prior day's range, so be it. It'll set up a trade possibly for next week. Netflix, what's going on with Netflix? Hammer candle on the prior day's session. That does strike me as more bullish than bearish. Big look underneath the Monday low. Closed back inside of the Monday range. Right, so sellers kind of failing here. I would say so far, Apple and Netflix are looking more bullish than bearish, opening right at the prior high of day. You want to see respect of 287. 287, if we're above that, triggers a daily buy setup, right? This hammer candle offers a daily buy. Over the hammer high, you could look for a rotation back to 303. Stop would go under here. Does that make sense risk-reward wise? Not really from a swing trade perspective, but as a day trader, recognizing that this is technically a buy setup, if we find an intraday pattern where we can put a stop loss, I don't know, let's say we get an opening range and break out. If we can put a stop here and target, let's say this 300 figure, now we're cooking with fire, right? That's certainly a 3-to-1, or just overall favoring a bullish outcome. Right, so Netflix looking good here for some upside over 287, honestly, with the daily setup from here. If we just chop around in the prior day's range, again, nothing to really be done. I would not be looking for shorts given the lower wick from yesterday's session. Tesla, finally seeing a little bit of upside here in the pre-market after just getting annihilated the past couple of weeks. What do we see? Tesla, honestly looking for a short up against 177.12. You're looking for a break, retest, and continuation in the downward direction. So I would see what the reaction is at 177.12 and kind of monitor for, inverted hammers up here, short underneath the lows, target underneath, look for double top up there, neckline break, look lower, head and shoulders up here, neckline break, look lower, right? So Tesla, all eyes on 177.12. We are opening on a gap up, so be mindful that we can see a fade first and then some sort of rally. If we just rally, that's a better setup for a short trade, right? So if we just rally here, if we don't put in any gap fill whatsoever, and this remains as an open gap, then now you have two ways to trade Tesla short. You could look for the entry here, stop over the top, target the gap right here and here, target 1, target 2, monitor for continuation. Or if this is a bit too aggressive for you, you're not willing to put on the trade here at 177, then the look is for, okay, we made it there, we rolled over, lower highs or whatever. Now your entry is through the gap for the first trade, right? So now you're entering here, target 1 is here, and then monitoring for continuation after that. So no gap fill on Tesla would be the ideal outcome here if we're looking for stronger shorts up around 177. Okay, so I would love to see Tesla continue and then roll over off of that level. If it blasts right up through 177, all right, no, not a short. not a short. If we start blasting right through, if we don't put in that pattern, if we don't put in the inverted hammer, if we don't put in any signs of selling pressure here at 177.12, then okay, it's not a short. All right, the structure was there, but the setup was not. Then we can't fight that. So that's the area of interest, and that's what I'd be watching for. If it does fill the gap and then reverse, it's a little bit more difficult to put in play because now, of course, we've got a proven high or low. All right, and we're fighting the trend. Whereas if we just rally first, now we've got lows, highs. Is that going to be a daily low or high is the question, right? Here, here, here. Okay, so that's Tesla. Worth keeping an eye on this morning's session. Google. What's going on with Google? Interesting look, right? Really, really interesting look. It did get the big breakdown yesterday morning on some momentum here, but it just snapped right back. Really, really impressive. So what is it? You guys know the deal. Look below and fail. Over the high of the prior day's session, it's a hammer high. If we take that out, rotates to the top of the range, right? $100 is back in play inside of Google. Currently in the pre-market, we're opening right at those highs, so I would, definitely favor more of a bullish look in Google as opposed to a bearish one. I would only be bearish once again on Google if we crack and get some price acceptance underneath 96.25. All right, so if we do something like this, different story. Of course, you can flip back to the bear camp, noting that we're back down underneath the range. But if we're here and breaking out, it's bullish. You should be looking for those upper targets around 100. If it's here and consolidating, okay, look for something like that to develop over time. Your breakout's over the Tuesday high, right? Tuesday hammer high, 50 SMA, stacked right there. That's Google. Metaverse and Zuckerberg, some rumors about him resigning the other day, yesterday, kind of funny, that fake news look or whatever you want to call it, right? Someone put out an article, Zuckerberg set to resign in 2023. I think they had a spokesperson come out and say, nope, false. Meta, slight gap up. Overall choppy daily range. Nothing about this chart looks all that impressive to me. The one takeaway would be on the daily that we undercut the low, and just like almost everything else we've seen so far, closed back firmly in the Monday range. So a little bit more bullish than bearish. If you did want to look for some upside, your target's at 114.50. This probably falls low on my priority list. I'd rather see Google, Tesla, or Apple. All right, even Netflix looked better, right? Meta is pretty low for me. NVIDIA, beautiful run yesterday. I mean, absolutely wonderful. We talked about it being the relative strength trade if we needed it in the pre-market. We got that. We talked about the 155 breakout with the bull flag yesterday in the Discord. Just a wonderful trade. Hopefully you guys caught a piece of it. In terms of going forward, daily chart has found a higher low. Daily chart has found a higher low. We've gone low, higher low, trying to confirm this is a higher low. Big gap up here this morning. Not big per se, but flirting with a bit of a gap up. Definitely more bullish than bearish. You want to see continued holds of 158. This might be difficult to get a day two continuation off of on low volume. So if this pulls back and we see the market kind of just sideways choppy, not really all that impressive, 158 hold is important here inside of NVIDIA on the pullback. All right, so watch 158. Do favor continued upside in NVIDIA. Next up, Microsoft. A little bit of a gap up here this morning as well. Look at that. Nice. In terms of Microsoft's daily chart, this one has looked great for a while. We talked about relative strength here as well, noting that it never really got any price acceptance underneath that 240, and it actually closed a hammer here, looked underneath the Monday low, rallied, closed above the Monday high. So technically a bull engulfer, although it didn't open down here, it explored underneath, right, in this lower wick, which strikes me as bullish. So looking for that continuation in Microsoft to the top of the range around 247.50. 247.50, we're pretty close, right? We're pretty darn close. So why is that level? Oh, it's because I don't have it drawn in. Duh. That's my own fault. 247.50, right around in here. I'm like, why is that not showing up on the 30-minute side? I didn't have it drawn in. So opening ranges, breaks of the overnight high. Of course, that triggers the trade into that in the first place. Any pullbacks, you just want to see it hold, ideally, this level right here. 243.64, the opening print and the consolidation lows from yesterday's afternoon, right? So pullbacks that hold this, beautiful, higher lows in play, over time, break here, gets you to that upside target. Last but certainly not least, the mini beast, we've got Amazon. What's going on with Amazonia? Certainly inside doji, inside hammer doji, we should call it, right? Inside the prior day's range. Looking for a long over the top. It looks like we're gapping right into that level. So watch Amazon. If Amazon can hold up over the prior high of day, right here at 93.30, it's game on to the upside. Some of these upper targets, I would focus on 95. 95 is an upper target. That's where we fell off of on the Monday session. It's where we had a little bit of support, right? So 95. Overall, again, the sellers do not have it going on. I've not seen any consistent argument for selling pressure given the lower wicks that have looked into these gaps, and the sellers just have nothing there, right? No traction. So holding this high, and Amazon looks good for upside. Falling back down into the range, treat it as the possibility for a double inside bar setup. If it's a consolidation day like this, beautiful on Friday, half-day session, but if we break one way or another, it's going to tell us something about Amazon, all right? So Amazon over the prior high of day is interesting. Inside the range, not all that interested. Certainly wouldn't be pressing the bet on shorts given the lower wicks that have been placed, all right? That's it. That's the core list of companies. Let me scroll up in the chat, make sure I'm not missing anything critical. Questions, comments, concerns. Yeah, the like button needs a little bit of love. 700 people in the stream, but 200 likes. Seems like an issue to me. Let's see what else. What else? All right, cool. I'm not seeing any big questions, comments, concerns. Just some compliments here and there, always appreciated. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Everybody dropping, compliments in the chat, always welcomed, and I appreciate that. I very gently pressed the like button from Neil Hanks. Awesome. All right, I think that's going to do it, right? There's nothing crazy going on in the ES, let's hope, that we've missed in the last couple of minutes here. ES 15-minute time frame chart. Where are we? We're inside the prior day's range. All right, you know what? Let's do I'm feeling grateful. I'm feeling thankful. Let's do a first 5-minute session on this morning. I know a bunch of people seem to have already tuned out. The numbers are dropping like flies. We've got 619, 620, 614. They're dropping out of here. But we're going to do the first 5 minutes live just to see how this day starts to unfold here. Let's see. Any other questions, comments, concerns in the minute and a half we have until the bell actually rings? What's the equivalent of the RTY in equities? IWM is the Russell. Yep. So Neil answered that for you, M. Leonard. Hopefully you got to that. Mr. Prayer saying that been loving the Discord and having a great time talking with everybody. Thanks. Absolutely. What else? INF. Any way that we could get? Is the offer still on the table for some custom tunes from either yourself or a friend? I can't remember exactly who you said mixes music, but is that possible? Is that still a possibility? We can get the tunes loaded up on the morning, waiting screen. We could try that. When does the market close today, Edwards? It's a normal day today. On Friday, it's a 1 p.m. close. 1 p.m. close. Have a look at the financials. Something interesting going on in financials. Let's give it the first 5 seconds here, and then I'll take a peek at the XLF. I just want to see what the opening drive is, if there is one. Ding, ding, ding. Ringing us in loud and clear. Markets are open. All right. Nothing crazy yet on the open, just getting a little bit of a green bar that's starting to form. But, it's so early. Whenever we're literally 15 seconds into the market open, it's pretty tough to say, oh, it's a green bar, right? Anything can change in the blink of an eye here. But so far, it does seem that the buying pressure is there instead of immediate sell-side pressure. It's been more green than red in the past 30 seconds. So, okay. Tempo's fairly, I don't want to say slow, but let's keep in mind again that the range here is not the largest. We're dealing with a 5-point price axis here. So there's a little bit of movement, but the ranges that we're traveling is I don't want to say, it's not slow, but it's not an expansive range. All right. So, all right. In the back of our minds, we've got an ES that's opening drive is bullish. Let's take a look at that XLF that was being mentioned. XLF daily chart. Looks good. It's hard to argue that this is a bad look, but if we can crack this resistance, we're coming out of this big balance area here. Maybe that continues to fuel the market rally. We just know that, you know, it's going to be a tough area, number one. But number two, the financial sector has really done its job here. It's time, like I can't reiterate the importance enough of the XLY needing to get in gear. This thing staying down here inside this range is this is starting to become a real big red flag for the market. It's not the look that you would want to see for a more risk-on type environment. The fact that it continues to lag is kind of the concern there. Back to the ES, let's take a quick look at the opening internals and see where we've opened up here. So this is kind of neutral there. We've got our advanced decline line kind of neutral, closer to the zero. It's not like we're opening at some extreme here or here, which is fine. And in the tick, we're slightly negative, negative 400, not underneath or above. So a fairly neutral open. And again, this is kind of what we always look for when we're opening in range. Now, I will say, again, that the outcomes should have been more bullish than bearish because we're above the value area high, and we talked about that, right? So ES, it's playing out kind of in that bullish manner where we are getting some bull consolidation above that value area high still. The first, little move here, the opening drive is higher, which is bullish, of course. We're respecting that opening print here, bullish. The breadth's really neutral, right? They don't have it going on. One reads, one handles, or actually a two handle on the NASDAQ. But, you're not really going to have impressive days when, number one, they're divergent, meaning two different, one negative, one positive. But when there reads like this, one handle, you're not going to have all that impressive of a day either, generally. And that makes sense given what we know about Thanksgiving and quite literally everything we discussed in the pre-market stream. SPY cash, of course, moving higher over that prior high of day. Let's see how some of these setups are unfolding. So Apple, continue to watch your highs in here, 150.50 roughly. Netflix, where are we? Fading back down into range. So that daily buy setup has not triggered. Ultimately, you would want to see some sort of recapture of the open, a new trend develop over the top. Tesla, same idea. Remember that we were discussing it would have been better to rally first and then fade off, right? So we're not getting that. We're getting a pull in for the gap close possibly first. So not in love with Tesla. Wanted to see the rally first and then a fade. Google looks good. Google looks good, right? Respecting the prior high of day. Google is on watch, higher low pullbacks here into like the mid-morning session. Let this thing play out. Let the 5-minute bars close. If we can get some sort of pullback to VWAP, looking good on the daily pattern, right? Look below and fail. So Google's nice. Meta looks good as well. We know that we had a daily hammer. It's just, tough to play into that 114. I just don't like this chart compared to what we just saw in Google. I'd much rather play the Google chart. NVIDIA, continue to make its move higher. Again, probably want to see a pullback at this point, given the big green day from yesterday. Watching for higher low pullback in NVIDIA over 158. Solid, good, beautiful. Microsoft, struggling a little bit at the prior highs, but remember that this is a bull candle here, so any holds of this, that's the level we discussed. Prior open, pullback from the afternoon. Maybe these just close out as back-to-back hammers and it's a long over the high. Of course, that's the prior 4 o'clock or 3:55 candle from yesterday. But I'd watch your high of day here, this 245.30 area in Microsoft. And Amazon also kind of trying to resolve that hammer high in the prior day's range, though. A little bit of a rejection there on the VWAP test. Amazon's not as clear to me. So overall, let's go back to Apple. Apple's looking good, and your Google is looking good if we can stay above this VWAP here. Okay? So those are the two long trades I would look for, Apple and Google. Tesla, what's going on? Okay, Tesla maybe back on the table. Maybe back on the table. Watching that 177 area. All right, watching the 177. I'm not in love with longs to get there. But I would just watch for like upside. And even if it stalls out sooner, starts to put in a top underneath 177, that could be tradable as well back in the downward direction. So watch Tesla for the shorts. Apple is your long, looking good here over the top. And the other one was, where were we? Google. All right, so looking for higher low pullbacks on 5-minute charts. Respective VWAP. Google, flirting with it there. Let's go back to the ES and the dashboard quickly. One handle on your NYSE still red. 2 on the NASDAQ, a little bit more bullish in tech. Advanced decliners getting closer to that 0 line. Remember that this is where responsive trade back and forth activity takes place. And your tick's fairly neutral around the 0 line as well. ES did move above the prior high of day, which is a step in the bullish direction, obviously. So considering what's been going on here, I think opening drive being bullish, internals being neutral, more bullish in tech. We just got the flip on the nicey breath. It's back and forth, but we're getting close, right? I would have a slight bull edge this morning, and hopefully you've had that in your own trading. Oops, I don't know what that is. What is this box? Get out of here. Hopefully you've had that in your own trading since we mentioned opening above value area high. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave you with that. Probably watching Apple for the higher low pullback at this point. Apple higher low pullback, trying to get on board for some upside. Google looks like it's struggling in comparison. Obviously a little bit more relative strength in the Apple name there. So I would watch that. And Tesla continuing to chug in the upward direction. Yes, watch your 177. All right, so those are the 3 things I'll be watching. Apple, number 1 priority. Google, number 2 priority. Tesla, number 3 priority. All right, 177 short. I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you so much for tuning in on this morning session. If I don't see you, enjoy your Thanksgiving. Hopefully I do see you. I'm going to try to get a midweek market update out tonight, seeing how the charts close out, and we can go into the Friday shortened trading session. All right, that's going to do it. Thanks all. INF will have to link up in the comments section and see if we can get that mix going in the pre-market waiting stream. All right. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Again, wishing all of you a great Thanksgiving. If I don't see you, hopefully I do see you in the comments of tonight's video. Join the Discord if you're not in there already. It's linked down below. And with that said, I wish you all a green trading day.